time. A couple of weeks ago, we heard that Kamala Harris is going to give $25,000 to people who are first home buyers. And today there is in the Washington Post headline, Harris to pitch $50,000 tax benefit for small businesses. These and other policy positions have not been stated by Kamala Harris. They're all they get all the headlines, but anonymous staffers in the campaign are the source of all of this information, and thus far Kamala has not commented on any of those things. Leadership Institute is a nonpartisan educational foundation, and we don't support or oppose candidates. But I did come up myself with a couplet which I thought was appropriate, and I will share with you. Harris and Waltz are trying to spoof us. Both are far leftists, and she is a doofus. I encourage you to live tweet today's event. The hashtag is on the screen, and you can tweet it out. In 2024, your Leadership Institute has already trained 30,442 conservatives at 2,549 individual training events. That's this year. Since 1979, the Institute has trained over 320,000 activists, students, and leaders. And I urge you to take a moment to review our upcoming trainings. They're on our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training. And please consider attending one of these events or sending a friend to a training. My pleasure now to introduce Veronica Hayes, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Veronica is the digital training manager here at the Leadership Institute. She facilitates trainings for conservatives across the country and around the world. In this role, Veronica is dedicated to empowering conservatives with essential digital skills, enabling them to effect positive change in their communities and beyond. Previously, she was a culture blogger for the Media Research Center, where she analyzed leftist bias in the media and provided commentary on cultural issues from a conservative viewpoint. She attended George Mason University, where she studied international relations. She is the rarity in these parts. She's a native of Northern Virginia, and she's committed to preserving Christian traditional values that make this nation great. Veronica, will you step up here and offer an invocation and lead us in the pledge?
Thank you, Morton. Let us pray. God, our Father, giver of life, we entrust our nation to your loving care. You are the rock on which this nation was founded. You alone are the true source of our cherished rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Reclaim this land for your glory and dwell among your people. Send your Spirit to touch the hearts of our nation's leaders. Open their minds to the great worth of human life and the responsibilities that accompany human freedom. Remind your people that true happiness is rooted in seeking and doing your will. Lord, I ask you to bless everyone in this room, our speaker this morning, and the Leadership Institute. And now, everyone, let us all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thanks a lot, Veronica. And now, for a brief programs report, I'm pleased to introduce Dina Espenscheid. Before joining the Institute in 2016, Dina held a variety of positions in pro-life ministries, sales and marketing, policy organizations, and political campaigns. Her last position before joining the Leadership Institute was with the Donald Trump for President campaign, voter contact, and field operations here in Virginia and in West Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. When Dina joined the state and local leaders team 8 years ago, she immediately jumped in and started training activists around the country. Since then, she has managed 451 separate schools and has trained at those schools 15,618 Leadership Institute graduates. In 2022, Dina left the State and Local Leaders Division to start the Pro-Life Programs Division, where she is our current Director of Pro-Life Programs. And this new division started the day before the Dobbs decision and has been networking with local, state, and national pro-life organizations to bring to them specialized training to be used in their communities. Since June of 2022, the Leadership Institute has had 6,504 pro-life grads at 178 individual schools with pro-life content. Dina still has an additional 31 pro-life schools to manage in 9 different states before the 2024 elections. Dina, come give us a brief programs report.
Absolutely. Thank you, Morton. Good morning, everyone. So as Morton just pointed out, our first official day of having a pro-life program at the Leadership Institute that was focused on training people to do pro-life activism better was the day that the Dobbs decision came down and Roe versus Wade died. And since then, we have seen great changes in the public policy environment. These are all the states that are have either had elections on pro-abortion and pro-life amendments, are facing them this year, or will have them in 2026. So the issue is not going away. And the reason why the issue is not going away comes from Morton Blackwell's Laws of Public Policy. If you look in this pamphlet, you find law number 44. It is up there on your screen for your reading pleasure. Moral outrage is the most powerful motivating force in politics. And unfortunately, the polling is showing us that this year, still, for women under age 35, single women without children under age 35, the reason why they're getting out the vote is that Dobbs decision in the fall of Roe versus Wade, because they've been convinced by radical leftists that they've lost 100% of all of their abortion rights, even in states where they can get abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, such as Maryland, where I was last night training activists. So what are we doing about it? Well, again, this is what 2026 is going to look like. Those are all the states where we're going to be fighting, the ones that are in green. We have been going, Leadership Institute has been going to, we've gone to 29 different states so far, training activists in 202 training programs that have had pro-life content. The number Morton gave, about 180, that's the number that was done and managed by myself and Jerry Sharp in the pro-life division. But unfortunately, we can't do them all. So we've handed off some of the trainings to our grassroots department, to our school boards. Even the youth leadership has done some pro-life focused trainings for the activists out there. And so far, those 202 trainings, we've taught things like, we take the trainings that we already do at the Leadership Institute and we teach additional information, such as, this is an example of the Overton window. The idea that on the public policy scale, there's on the far left, you've got far leftist policies, and on the far right, you've got far right policies, and somewhere in between is where the public wants the public policy. Well, to move them to your side, you don't just walk up to them and shout, abortion is murder. You have to talk just to the right of where their window is and bring them along. One of those examples of how we do that is this statement here. When people say abortion is needed for health care, we try to take the moral outrage out of their sails and teach them something different. And this statement is something that we give to our students that they can say when people are saying abortion is the health care. You can say, well, you know what? Life-saving medical care, ectopic pregnancy care, miscarriage care are always available and always legal in every single state. They're always necessary. But because of medical advancements in the past 5 to 10 years, a good doctor can treat both the mother and the baby for any medical condition. And if the baby dies, that's a tragedy, that's not an abortion. And when you tell them that, they start to take the moral outrage out, start to think, because they're starting to realize, I might not have a good doctor if my doctor is trying to persuade me to abort a baby that I want. And it's really amazing. So again, our results have been that we've been in 29 states, 202 trainings, 6,683 grads. Our need is out there because civics education hasn't been. People think that they need to change the amendment, change the Constitution in order to change laws. That's not how it works. But let me tell you, our biggest and best result is this couple right here. Sheila and Kevin actually went to an OBGYN appointment the morning of their LI training. And she was told she had to abort because she would probably die and their baby would have terrible disabilities. Well, baby Ben was born in December after they went and got a second opinion. Baby Ben is 100% healthy, so is Sheila. The family is happy, and it's all because of donors and people like you that support the Leadership Institute. Thank you guys so very much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Dana. She is extraordinarily competent and tireless. This lady is tireless. Now, to introduce our speaker, I present to you Christian Matos. Christian is originally from Verona, New Jersey, and is a recent graduate of American University. He majored in political science and completed a combined bachelor's and master's program in only 4 years. He completed his master's in 2023. During his time in D.C., Christian has been a State Affairs Associate at Americans for Tax Reform. He was part of the Heritage Foundation's Young Leaders Program. He was also our digital training intern here at the Leadership Institute last fall semester. Growing up, some of his fondest memories were going to trap shooting with his father, and these experiences taught him to appreciate and respect gun rights and fostered his passion for the Second Amendment. Christian hopes to attend law school somewhere in this area soon, and ultimately to become an expert in the Second Amendment space, fighting for gun owners' rights across the country. Outside of work, he enjoys reading science fiction novels, which was a great passion of mine in my youth. And he likes to watch the New York Mets, which were no part of my youth. On the weekends, he tries to take advantage of everything Washington, D.C. has to offer, including the museums and cheering on the Washington Nationals. Christian is currently our Digital Operations Fellow at the Leadership Institute. Christian, please introduce our distinguished speaker, and it's a real treat to have this excellent man as our speaker. Christian?
Circuit Judge Douglas Ginsburg was appointed to the United States Courts of Appeals for the District of Columbia in 1986. He served as Chief Judge from 2001 to 2008. After receiving his B.S. from Cornell University in 1970 and his J.D. from the University of Chicago Law School in 1973, he clerked on the D.C. Circuit and for Justice Thurgood Marshall on the United States Supreme Court. Thereafter, Judge Ginsburg was a professor at Harvard Law School, the Deputy Assistant and then Assistant Attorney General for the Antitrust Division of the DOJ, as well as the Administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs inside the Office of Management and Budget, also known as the Regulatory Czar. Concurrent with his service on the federal bench, Judge Ginsburg has taught at the law schools of the University of Chicago, NYU, Columbia, Harvard, and University College London. Judge Ginsburg is currently a professor at the Law School of George Mason University, Antonin Scalia. Judge Ginsburg is also the chairman of the International Advisory Board of the Global Antitrust Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School. In 2020, he received the John Sherman Award from the Department of Justice for outstanding contributions to the field of antitrust law, the protection of American consumers, and the preservation of economic liberty. In 2022, he received the Freedom of the City of London for his contributions to the rule of law. Judge Ginsburg.
Thank you all. Well, now I know this is a perilous situation because light travels faster than sound, and someone may appear to be bright until they start speaking. I'm here to reinforce what I think everybody here has probably heard about or is aware of in some degree, and that is the problem we have in the United States of an increasingly civically ignorant population. The more recently one was graduated from high school, the less one is likely to know about our government, about our history, and about civic participation. Until the 1960s, it was common in a large public high school to find three distinct courses in civics, civics and government. Civics itself, that course, explored the role of citizens, especially at the local and state levels, which is often forgot about these days. Then problems of democracy, the second course, encouraged students to really discuss current issues and learn how to do so in an appropriate way. And then U.S. government was the third course, and that focused on structures and functions of government. So that's all history now. Since then, the picture in our public schools has become increasingly bleak in this regard, and lack of civic education is correlated pretty well with low voter participation, with less engagement for young adults, less engagement with organizations of all sort, and actually even to a lesser degree of empathy for other people. If you don't engage in civil discourse, it's very easy to vilify and dislike someone with whom you disagree, and much harder if you do engage in civil discourse with them. So civic education really was a substantial concern of George Washington's and of some of his other colleagues, some of his colleagues in the founding, particularly Thomas Jefferson here in the Commonwealth. And indeed, he urged civic education and wanted to see the establishment of a national university with that in mind. It didn't happen in his lifetime. Jefferson, of course, took matters into his own hands in establishing the University of Virginia and prescribing a curriculum that was thoughtfully and heavily engaged with government and political philosophy. So that mission for higher education was diminished over time, although it came to flourish at the secondary level. And pardon me, since the 1920s, starting in the 1920s, it was quite common for students to have at least one course in U.S. government, and then that built up to the point where we had those 3 courses very commonly. But the percentage of students who actually got a course in civics over time plunged, and that went from 52% in 1960, so just over half, to 22% in 1972. And 1972 is just the point at which the curve gets even more drastic. By 1972, fewer than 10% had the more advanced courses, anything other than a basic civics course. In 2018, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the so-called nation's report card, showed only a slight increase in civics education being offered from 1998. Of the 8th grade participants, 24% scored at or above the proficient level in NAEP civics testing. The gap between white and Hispanic students, that's the only place where there was progress. It's the only level at which that gap closed, not by leveling down, but actually by Hispanic students getting a better grounding in U.S. government. The Annenberg Foundation in Philadelphia did a survey that looked at the link between high school civics classes and actual civic knowledge, and did a regression analysis and so on. It's a very sophisticated outfit, as you may know. And it showed that people who said they took high school civics were more likely to know the answers to 6 survey questions just on straight knowledge. Here are some of the results. 39% of the public could name the 3 branches of government. 14% could name 2. 25% could name 1, and 22% couldn't name any. Now that is a very daunting set of figures. I mean, when you've got a situation in which 78% of the public cannot name the 3 branches of government, you know that something is amiss, and of course that so many can't name even more than one. Continuing with Annenberg, 54% do not know that people who are in the United States illegally have any rights under the Constitution. Now that's a very dangerous fact. No rights under the Constitution. The last time we had people who lived outside the Constitution was with slavery. Right? So that would mean that a person who's here illegally could be arrested summarily, tortured perhaps, kept in isolation, no need for any kind of warrants or any sort of humane treatment. 40% of the public got it right, that even someone who is here illegally has the benefit of some constitutional rights. As of 2018, just pretty recent history as these things go, only 9 states and D.C. required a full year of government or civics. Now, these numbers are not reliable because the states lie. They don't correct out-of-date figures. If you go to some of the websites on these things, you will see that everything is actually quite wonderful in many states. But their data are shockingly misleading. In Colorado, here's some good news. They have what they call judicially speaking program, which explains that in which judges go out to schools and explain the role of courts before then the schools following through with moot courts and that sort of exercise, so that students actually learn something about it. 79% of social studies teachers say they are unprepared to teach civics. Why? Well, at least that percentage never had civics, for one thing. Right? They can become a social studies teacher without knowing anything about civics. and they're unfamiliar with the availability of teaching materials for that. I'll skip a detail or two. Let's get along to what can be done about this. It's clearly a dire situation when you have that much ignorance. Dina just a moment ago alluded to encountering people, and I'm sure that's not uncommon, who don't know the difference between changing the law and changing the Constitution, between a statute and an amendment. It means that people running for office can promise to do all sorts of things that are either unconstitutional, blatantly so, or would require the consensus of both houses of the Congress if they're running for presidency. And we saw this earlier, well, I'm sure it's going on today too, but earlier in this campaign season, it was I'll think of somebody who's dropped out, Ramaswamy, for instance, was promising all sorts of things or proposing all sorts of things that he would do on day one they couldn't possibly do, that they're just unconstitutional. Or blatantly illegal, as in the case of saying I'll fire a third of the workforce on day one, as though there were no statutes involved in that process. Called civil service, right? So now here's the baseline right now. Fewer than half of the states require students to take a civics exam before being graduated from high school. And of those that do, the enforcement is probably somewhat spotty. So this has led, for the last several Congresses, two senators, Cornyn and Coons, Republican and Democrat respectively, to introduce the Civics Secures Democracy Act. Well, what is it? It's not a great idea. It's promising money to schools to train students to go down to City Hall and complain about things. But it's not instructional. Basically, it's just uninformed activism, completely antithetical to what goes on at the Leadership Institute. Right? Just form a mob, essentially. Not a good idea, and yet that's the only thing that's ever really shown up at the federal level. Not that we need the federal involvement for this. The policy solution that's received the most focus and actual progress has been to, state after state, to require that students pass the naturalization exam. The exam of 100 questions that a person who wants to become a citizen must pass in order to be sworn in. That 100 questions, I can tell you, you can study for that, you can pass that, and you don't have to actually learn anything of value. You can memorize answers. There are questions with 5 or 6 correct answers. You just remember one. What is George Washington famous for is one of them. Name a U.S. territory is another. And there are literally 5 correct answers to each of those. Where is the Statue of Liberty is another one. That's not civics education. That is just a sort of a hassling someone to engage in accumulating some useless information. But it can be put to good use, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Now, there are 18 states that have decided, just in the last 6 years, to actually require passing the naturalization exam. This is the only real progress that's been made. And if they do it in a rote manner, it's not going to be of much value. If they do it intelligently, it can be used to good effect. Interestingly, the states, those 18 states include blue, red, and purple states. It doesn't seem, the realization that we have a problem does not seem to be a partisan proposition. In 2022, 14 states made decisions along these lines. Now, this decision to, let's say, require passing the naturalization exam to be graduated from high school is on close inspection, is a nice gesture, but whether it actually happens is another matter. The governor of Florida said 3 years ago that he would do this, and it hasn't happened yet. Apparently, the bureaucracy is not in favor of it, the education bureaucracy in the state. On the other hand, there are states in which a gubernatorial decree has been carried out, and there are several states in which the legislature has required it, and of course when that happens, it actually pretty much gets implemented. So Indiana 2 years ago, Oklahoma this year, New Hampshire was the first, I think, about 5 years ago or 4 years ago, actually require every school in the high school in the state to have a course that entails passing the naturalization exam. So what I've done along these lines is to create materials that I think are useful for students to learn in the course of passing the naturalization exam. And I did it by creating 100 2.5-minute videos, one for each of the questions. And in each instance, the idea is to actually learn something. And you know, kids at that age, you can never tell what they'll pick up on and what they will, what will actually affect the way in which they live their lives. Which is why it's so important to expose children to such a wide variety of things and take them places and museums and who knows what. So just to take an example, where is the Statue of Liberty, right? I mean, the most useless question of all. Well, 2.5 minutes, we can turn that into Ellis Island and the history of immigration. And we've got archival film going all the way back to the initiation of Ellis Island. And lots of materials, visual materials, that can be used for that purpose. Plus, one can, and we do use animation in other questions, in other videos, reenactments, all these things that keep it lively and moving, and we know, and it's gamified so the kids get badges for a number of correct answers and so on. All this was done by IZZIT.org, IZZIT, which does nothing but create educational materials for schools, elementary, middle, and high schools. High quality video materials. Their materials are being used in 31% of all public high schools in the United States. Not this particular program, but of the things that they produce. So they have a very good reputation, and everything is provided free of charge. The whole program is on the web. It's called civicsfundamentals.org, on the web free. Teachers who sign up for their class can get lesson plans, flashcards, vocabulary lists, pretty much anything they might want. And it's been packaged by IZZIT in a larger framework called Simply Civics, which is a whole course, a semester-long course in civics, and it has, again, all video materials, and that's being used increasingly. That's much newer than Civics Fundamentals came out about 2021, I think. Well, it was, I know, we made it during COVID because I couldn't go out and do other things. I'd been making films for public television on the Constitution and so on, and when we couldn't go out, we did this indoors. So the program is now being used, civicsfundamentals.org is being used by schools in 10 states that we know of, and that several of those have picked it up only in the last year. So this is continuing on. Yesterday we got a grant of $100,000 for further marketing of the program in additional states. Chris, name a U.S. territory. Puerto Rico. People in the East almost always say Puerto Rico. And there are 4 others, and of the 5, each one was acquired at a different time for a different purpose. And all of that can be conveyed. There's some history here, you know, involving the Spanish-American War, involving fear as the First World War was impending, fear that islands in the Caribbean would be used by Germany, and so we acquired them with some coercion, actually, or pressure, let's say, financial and other pressure the previous colonial powers. But anyway, what is a territory? That's tougher.
Not fully a state, but still recognized as part of the country.
It's part of the country. It's not a state. Most of the states used to be territories or in territories, right? And they exemplify a founding principle: no taxation without representation. They're not represented in the Congress, and they're not subject to federal income taxation. And where are they? Well, in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. Right? American Samoa, the Mariana Islands, Guam, all in the Pacific. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands in American Virgins in the Caribbean. So it can be done. It can be done, and there's hope for actually making some return for civics education. Good intentions are not enough. In 2001, the Congress passed President Bush's proposal, No Child Left Behind. It gave money to school systems for improving their scores in math and reading. Well, what does that mean? It means music, art, and civics were either downplayed or discontinued altogether. Another kick down in the number of schools that are. Now, that program's been a failure, and almost all the states have withdrawn from it, not for the reasons that I just gave, but for other reasons. So anyway, we have a problem. There are solutions. By the way, what I'm doing and what ISIT is doing is not alone. There are half a dozen organizations that are producing materials. The Jack Miller Center in Florida emphasizes teaching from original documents, and they teach teachers. They've taught 1,100 college professors, and they're working now with, in Florida and several other states, teaching high school teachers how to teach civics using and American history using original documents, which is very stimulating for the students. Original documents are actually much more exciting than derivatives from them. That's enough from me. May I take a few questions? Okay, so, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Dello, and thank you for your work. My question is, I'm Catholic, and clearly some of the teaching in the public schools doesn't agree with Catholic teaching. My question is, can't parents sue the government for violating the First Amendment rights and harming the faith formation of their children? And if I could just comment, our school district mission statement says to foster an inclusive school district community based on respect, responsibility, equity, and global citizenship. So I asked them, I said, what would they be citizens of?
Global citizens, yeah. Well, first, as you know, anybody can sue anybody else. It's not a good idea, if that's all you have in mind, to do that. But the answer to your question is, I think, that the First Amendment is part of the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't govern us. It doesn't govern Catholic schools. It doesn't govern intermediate organizations like the Leadership Institute. It governs those who govern us, okay? And so it restricts government. It doesn't impose obligations, with very few exceptions. And that's the source of our liberty, the restrictions on government. The First Amendment doesn't entitle you to information. It keeps the government away from blocking information or squelching speakers. But it's not a positive obligation on government to provide information or teaching or anything of that sort.
Can public schools, which are government,
Right.
harm the faith formation of children? They wouldn't be allowed to do that, would they?
I don't think everyone heard you.
Schools are a government institution, public schools, and how can they be allowed to harm the faith formation of Catholic students by directly undermining what the faith is of those students. I mean, that's the government. Do you understand?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's really important to call them what they are, government schools. Okay, that's the first step in progress here. Bear in mind, these are government schools. And of course, government schools cannot teach religious doctrine. Okay, they may teach things that are inconsistent with religious doctrine. That happens all the time, but they cannot teach religious doctrine. That's the safeguard that we have, no more than that, as far as I know. Morton, are you? Is that the hook? Are you getting the hook here? I think that's right. Okay. I mean, is that the time? Okay,
other question.
Okay.
My name's Kate Taylor. I'm from the Fairfax County Republicans. What do you think of this current trend in Britain to suppress the free speech of its citizenry, especially as they protest the whole immigration situation?
You did say in Britain. Yeah, in the UK. Well, I'm not familiar with what's going on there, but I don't agree with government suppressing full free speech, if that's the question in the UK or here or anywhere else. Got time for another? Sir.
Hi, Carl Gollivan. My question up front would be, is civic stupidity preceded by monetary stupidity? Since 1913, of course, we've had a privately controlled central bank, the Federal Reserve, and the inflation exponentially of credit has served as a hidden tax on everyone. And I would just point to the Constitution defining a dollar as 371 1/4 grains of finely milled silver. And I recently asked a Federal Reserve official, what is the definition today of a dollar? And he said, a dollar is what a dollar will buy. So it's a confidence game, and I would encourage you to consider monetary education as part of the program, specifically the American Monetary Institute, monetary.org, has a wonderful book, The Lost Science of Money, to share with your students. Thank you.
Take a look at it. It's certainly true that at a more basic level, financial literacy is at a very low level. And that too has now caused some pushback, some efforts to create instruction in financial literacy. And some of the programs working on civics in general include economics, which is a very useful addition. You can't load everything up into it, but certainly not on the immigration test. But the teaching of basic economics is another huge deficiency now in our K-12 education.
Other questions?
Sir? Yeah.
You haven't mentioned it, but I would assume that your program teaches that the use of these rights that we have constitutionally or statutorily are part of a civic responsibility.
Yes.
Well, my question is, does that teaching ever take account or acknowledge that in particularly Christian thought, it's also a responsibility to God to use all of the things that you have that can advance the kingdom, meaning particularly the Christian doctrine being that everything you own, you don't really own, it's in stewardship from God, and that includes your rights as a citizen of the United States. So I just wonder if you acknowledge that as part of your teaching, that it is a civic responsibility. In other words, why should people pay attention to this and use it properly?
The reason that we did use the naturalization exam was because that would make us immune to charges of partisanship and of indoctrination or of a religious perspective or what have you. And so the answer to your question is perhaps unfortunately no, because that would have really deprived us of the ability to say, look, this is what the government thinks, you know, a citizen ought to know. We don't agree with all of it, the Statue of Liberty, as I gave as an example, but that's what it is, and that makes it possible for public school teachers to be comfortable with the materials. So,
is it not part of the history of the nation? The same way that the history of immigration and the Statue of Liberty is part of our history?
well,
In other words, can you acknowledge it as part of our history as supplementing the civic duty?
not all of our history is on that naturalization exam, you know, better or worse.
DC, you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to tell everyone that Virginia is really on the ball in this area. And as we've tried to spread civics around the United States, we've found that working with the Secretary of Education in the state, it's like insurance. You have to go state to state to be certified and to get these civics programs included. So if anyone in the room has a lead into another state where there knows the Secretary of Education in various states, please see me after this, because we could work with you to help spread the word, as we say. And when the 250th is coming up, we'd love you to all get involved. I'm sure Morton and the Leadership Institute will be doing something, but the national one sort of disintegrated there. Hopefully it will be resurrected, but Virginia is also taking the lead on that. And there will be all kinds of events around the Commonwealth, from museums to schools, and it's really a great opportunity to spread civics education. So we look forward to working with you on that.
Let me ask a question here. The discussion has included states adopting this policy statewide. Is this program something that has been adopted individually by specific school boards?
So the way in which this works in every state we've encountered is that the state authorizes materials to be used, but never prescribes what has to be used. So, for instance, in Indiana, now that the schools, as of this moment, have to be offering the courses, the students have the teachers have a list from the state of suggested materials. So all we can do is hope to get it in front of the teachers. The school board is going to make that decision.
I see.
To use
but could, in the absence of the state having endorsed it as appropriate, could a school board introduce this in the school system at their local county level?
Yes, surely. And in fact, in many school districts, the teachers individually could decide to do it.
Right.
Yeah, it's a pretty highly decentralized scheme in almost every state.
Well, I suspected that would be the case. And sitting here, it occurred to me there's something that we can do that would promote the spread of this. Most everybody in the room remembers a couple of years ago a horrendous scandal in the Loudoun County schools where a young man wearing a dress to a high school in Loudoun County raped a girl in the girls' locker room. And the school hushed it up. They sent the student off to another high school in Loudoun County, and he proceeded to molest a girl at the high school to which he had been sent. This got an immense amount of publicity, and there was stirred up a considerable interest beyond what there had ever been before in what's going on in schools. And one result of that was that the Leadership Institute devised a specific program to train people who want to bring about changes in their local school boards, people who want to run for school board, people who want to elect sensible people to school boards. And that's proved very successful. We have currently, in the last couple of years, we have trained over 4,400 people at these schools, and soon we had a pleasant problem to have, which is we had the need for a new kind of school, which was a school for new school board members, so that they could achieve what they set out to do. We obviously have the contact information for all of these graduates of our training. There have been hundreds of people elected to the school board through the efforts of our graduates, and so even if our graduates aren't on the school board themselves, they often have contact with conservative members that they've helped elect. So I'm committing right now that we can send out to all the graduates of our school board training programs material about this school. You have it, I think, at every table, this description of it. We'll have a look at that and see if this would be sufficient to send, and if not, we could alter it so that it would be specifically directed to our graduates, and suggest to them that they could work in their own school board situations to have this very fine program adopted by the schools in their local school districts. So I'm happy to commit to that. We will do it. We'll send it out to 4,400 people, all of whom are concerned about school board matters, and probably every one of them would think that this is a good idea.
It's a great idea. It's a really great idea. Thank you.
Now, my next question is, have you had any success in dealing with the various homeschool organizations? In recent years, the number of students who do not go to public or private schools, but in fact are homeschooled, has increased. I have two teenage grandchildren who have been entirely homeschooled by their parents, but the whole homeschoolers are remarkably well organized in every community that I know about. Certainly my son and daughter-in-law are very active in the parents group. Have you approached the various homeschool organizations, and are they recommending this to the homeschooling parents that they work with?
Another really great idea, and with this grant that we got yesterday, it's certainly one of the things that we're going to want to pursue, or that is going to pursue. My wife and I homeschooled two girls for 9 years. And those were days when we were not well organized. We were organized among 23 families in Rappahannock County, and that was it. So yeah, well, that's a great idea.
There aren't very many more people in Rappahannock County.
That's true. Yeah. We had a high percentage. Morton, thank you for these ideas. This is just great, and I can see why you get results, because you think immediately about practical solutions.
You betcha, Red Ryder. Judge Ginsburg, we so much appreciate your coming. As a token of our appreciation, we want to present to you Leadership Institute Adam Smith tie. Adam Smith ties are familiar to you. Yeah. Our mutual friend Ed Meese wore an Adam Smith tie every day in the Reagan White House, and then every day when he was Attorney General of the United States. So I hope you like that.
Thank you, Morton. That was great.
Thank you all. Thank you. Okay. I invite you to join us on October 2nd for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast, and I encourage you to RSVP at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. Now, Kevin Tober, would you step up here? Okay, folks, this is Kevin. He is hard to miss. Okay? I invite any of you who would be interested in a tour of this building, our Stephen P.J. Wood building, and next door, our Emerson and Dolores Wrench Center for Campus Reform. When this event is over, come get with Kevin, and he will be happy to lead you on a tour of our building there. If you haven't visited us recently, there have been very dramatic changes, particularly next door at the space that we are now renting from the next door office building. And they'll give you a great tour, and they'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if there's some question that Kevin can't handle, he can take you up and drop by my office, and I will be happy to do my best to answer it. So I thank you all for coming. I thank Judge Ginsburg and his lovely wife, whom I've known for some years, D.C. Gray, for coming here today, and thanks again for coming.